Dan untuk membincangkan berkenaan kenyataan The Fed dan unjuran ekonomi Amerika Syarikat, kita bersama Shan Saeed, Ketua Pakar Ekonomi, Juwai IQI. Hi Shan, thank you for joining us. Now Shan, first let's start with the Fed's decision to keep the interest rates near zero for a long period. Do you think this is enough to help the US to recover from COVID-19 faster? And what's the biggest challenge for the US right now for recovery?
I think what Fed did last night was a clear indication that they have given blanket approval to the market. And this is not going to help the market. The biggest challenge right now for the US market is the confidence. Investors are not seeking confidence and they are not getting any confidence from the Fed. And if you recall, on 15th March, what Fed did on Sunday, they decreased the interest rate to almost zero. And that was a clear indication that Fed was panicking at that time. If you look at May's numbers, the budget deficit is up by $399 billion. Unemployment rate has touched almost, almost 15%. So I think all these macro measures are not helping the cause. Plus, with lately the COVID, the pandemic, and the riots in US have really put a drag on the economy. And going forward, I think the second quarter GDP, as it is expected, will go down by minus 53%. So I think it is massive. The investors are not getting any confidence from the Fed, and that is the biggest concern in the market right now.
So you're saying people are not spending on big-ticket items like properties, automotives in the US?
I think if you see right now, there is contraction in manufacturing that is holding back the consumption, and private investment is not coming to the market. These two are the important cornerstones for the economy. So when you don't have consumption, which contributes 68% to the GDP, and when you don't have private investment coming into the market, I think that is a clear indication that the markets are not having any confidence at the moment, and this will continue to have a bearish sentiment, not only in the short run, but also in the long run.
And Shan, also the Fed stated that the US economy will decrease or will contract to 6.5% this year. And you mentioned earlier unemployment rate will also be around 9.3% for the rest of 2020. What would this mean for this world's biggest economy? How will this shift investors to maybe other more growth-prone areas like Southeast Asia, Asia, and will this also affect consumers and business spending in the US?
I think if you see right now, the power pendulum has moved towards Asia. Asia is the growth story. Nobody is looking towards Europe. Nobody is looking towards US. Everybody is looking towards China, and everybody is looking towards ASEAN region. If you see, Fed has increased $2.2 trillion in the form of QE. Those extra dollars are coming into this part of the world. So I think Asia and ASEAN would be the growth story for the next 2 to 3 years. I am not very optimistic about Europe. I'm not very optimistic about US. According to our market intelligence report that we gathered from our investors last week, most of the investors are pulling their funds out of Europe and they're pulling funds out of US. So that is again a clear signal to the market that they are not looking towards advanced economies, they are looking towards China. As I mentioned in March this year when I was talking that China will come back in the market by Q2. China is already in the market and they are moving at a very fast pace. Investment is picking up, consumption is picking up, and if you look at ASEAN, they are slowly and gradually picking up as well. So I think if you are in Asia, if you are in ASEAN, that is where the growth story is. I don't see any growth story in Europe for the next 3 to 5 years. Europe's economy will become 1/3 of the global economy. US economy will recover in the next 2 to 3 years. It's not going to recover anytime soon. It will be an L-shaped recovery. It won't be a V-shaped recovery, as some people are suggesting. The stimulus package will create a V-shaped recovery. I think that's a fallacy.
Okay, and Shan, you also shared with us your foresight when it comes to the trade tension between the US and China. How will this affect? The uncertainties in the global trade and global growth right now?
I think trade war has taken the backseat. The most important thing right now is the COVID. That is a huge disruption for many economies. But most importantly, there are many geopolitical risks. that mainstream media is not talking about. China versus India, US versus China. So these two major geopolitical risks can trigger and it can escalate. And once these two triggers can escalate, that will be a huge impact on the market. And the market has started, seeing these two major factors. That's why, if you see in the last 2 to 3 days, the markets are not getting any traction. So I think geopolitical risk, COVID, these two major factors will continue to have a drag on the global financial markets.
And Shan, we want to deviate a bit from the what the Fed announced earlier, but focus on what Robert Kudlow mentioned earlier, that there is no systemic discrimination in the US. Now, having spent time in Chicago for your MBA, do you believe this to be true? Do you think this is a true statement?
I think not at University of Chicago, where people are selected on merit. There is no discrimination as such. But overall in US, yes, there is discrimination, huge discrimination between black and white, especially when it comes to the job market. The system is not that fair, as is normally stated in media or in press, that US is very fair. There's a clear discrimination on the basis of race, on the basis of color. So there's a clear divide between whites and blacks. And the divide is because there's a huge income disparity between whites and blacks. If you see Chicago, where most of the blacks are, I think unemployment rate is very high. The poverty levels are very high. You go to New York, where most of the people who are holding jobs in Wall Street are white. They are not black. So I think that shows that, there's a clear discrimination in US on the basis of color, on the basis of race, on your background, on your education, where you come from. So it is very important, especially in US.
And Shan, do you think COVID-19 will also create bigger economic disparities between the white and people of color in the US?
Absolutely. The divide has already taken, and when you add more debt to the economy and it's not contributing to the GDP growth, obviously it will contribute to the poverty level. It will contribute to the income disparity and the income gap that is happening right now. So what China has done, there's a great lesson for everyone. China has got 800 million people out of poverty in the last 36 years. You mention a single country in advanced economy where you have got huge sum of people out of poverty. I think poverty levels in US and Europe are going up because unemployment rate is going up. People are not productive. They are not contributing to the economy. That's why income levels there's a huge gap between income levels, and the economic disparity and income disparity will continue to rise in Europe and in US.
And also, Shan, let's come back to Malaysia. Malaysia is also entering the recovery phase of the MCO, and the PM announced penjana with many strategies to also encourage spending. Do you think the country is on the right track for recovery, given the steps taken by the government?
Since last month, after May 4, the economy has started opening up, and what we have witnessed, boots on the ground information, the consumption patterns look very strong, and we continue to be buoyant on Malaysia's economic outlook. Many people were saying Malaysia's economy will not be turning around, but by year end, we continue to maintain our stance that Malaysia's GDP will be 1 to 2%. Ringgit will continue to maintain structural stability. We have not changed our stance. What we shared in December last year, Ringgit will meander around between 3.97 and 4.30. Right now, when I speak, Ringgit is trading at 4.27. So Ringgit has actually appreciated 2.3% against USD. Overall, the economic outlook looks promising, and we expect Malaysia's GDP to be trading between 4 to 5% by 2021.
And we also know, Shan, I think this is probably the last two questions. We also know that the government has announced measures to spur demand or spending on big-ticket items, including cars and also properties. Properties-wise, what is Juwai IQI's view on this? Are people ready to spend? Are they confident to spend, looking at the job market right now?
You'll be surprised to know that people were still buying properties during MCO. People were still spending money during MCO. There is a fallacy, there is a myth that people don't spend money during MCO. So property-wise, yes, the recent measures taken by the government is very good for properties. Yes, people have started buying cars, So I think overall, the measures that the government has taken, the focus is only on one thing: to maintain consumption, to focus on growth. All the countries throughout the globe, they're only maintaining on one thing, they're only focused on one thing, and that is the growth. Growth comes when you have consumption. So I think when you have macroeconomic stability, that bolsters economic confidence. So I think I have shared with you, China is coming back to the market. They're coming back at a very strong pace. So China, ASEAN, these are the growth stories for the global economy, and they will be driving the growth of global economy in the next 2 to 3 years.
What's the biggest challenge? Briefly, Shan, briefly before you end this interview.
I think geopolitical risk will be a huge challenge for this part of the world.
Thank you very much, Shan Saeed, Ketua Pakar Ekonomi Juwai IQI, membincangkan berkenaan dengan pelbagai perkara daripada keputusan ataupun pengumuman The Fed kepada kenyataan Robert Kudlow dan juga kepada penjana yang diumumkan kerajaan sebelum ini. Dan kita akan mengakhiri Niaga AWANI di sini. Teruskan bersama kami untuk pelbagai perkembangan dan juga analisis tentang penjana PKPP dan kesannya kepada ekonomi. Saya Riza Zulkapli. Salam hormat.